Welcome to another episode of North Country Ham. This is the first of a few different videos I'll be doing in a series for upgrading and studying for your extra class license, so you can take and pass the Element 4 exam to expand yourself in the hobby. In this video I'll be going through the study book I've got from Gordon West on the extra class study guide, and as needed any diagrams or question pools off from the ARRL website. So please, I encourage you to stay with me, follow with me, study along, and maybe we'll all be able to upgrade and pass our next exam, so we're an amateur extra class license holder and have the entire hobby opened up to us. So come along and join me, and let's get started. Alright, so just to do a quick preface on this, I'm going to get into the video. I'm going to go through the first couple sections of the book, a brief history, the privileges that are opened up to us, and then how the exam is broke down, and then we'll go through questions and answer sessions. I'm doing this live. I'm not really studying ahead. I'm going through the book using what I've got in my ham shack with me to learn along and go from there. This first session I'll probably go through between 10 to 15 questions, and the next subsequent videos I'll be doing more again. So with that, any feedback you've got, please let me know, and let's get to it. Okay, this is the study book that I purchased. I purchased through Amazon. I'll have a link below in the comments for the Amazon, take you right to the product. This is the 2020 to 2024 Extra Class Element 4 study book by Gordon West. He's got a book for each one of the classes, and they are probably by far the most popular and most widely used study books. My plan of attack for the series of training videos going to do to upgrade for extra class is I'm going to start off the first few sections of the book, going through a little bit of what privileges you'll gain by upgrading, a little bit of the history to ham radio, just because I find it pretty interesting, and in a general sense, some of it may show up on your test in kind of the general questions, like as I've seen in the technician and in the general class test, in your generic type questions, overall general knowledge based, some of those will lead to a little bit of the history remarks to, parts of the bands and who it's open to, that you'll find a little bit in the history, but it's good knowledge to have and understand how this hobby has evolved. And then from there, I'll get into some of the sections, a little bit of breakdown of the test, so it's a little more understanding to anyone, as far as how they break the test down and the question pools and how that works. And then I'll get into the first section of questions, which starts off with like the rules and regs. I'll probably show the question and then reveal the answers and kind of, talk about it a little bit, and we can, and then I'll reveal the description as to what explains the answer and what the actual answer is. So with that, let's get started. Try to keep this as quick and expedient as possible. All right. So Gordon, a little bit on the book, about the author. Table of contents kind of goes through what your privileges are, a little bit of the history and how to best get into the prep for the exam, and then getting into the question pools. So, all right, first off, with the extra class privileges, obviously it'll open you when you upgrade to amateur class. It'll allow you to use all segments of the worldwide bands that are designated for amateur communications, for long distance voice, data, and video communications. and expands your general or advanced operating privileges. So essentially, all of the amateur bands that have been designated by the FCC, you're able to use all portions of the bands when you get your extra class privileges. So just a brief breakdown. Obviously, you'll gain a 25 kilohertz window of exclusive CW privileges at the bottom of your 80, 40, 20, and 15 meter bands. You'll gain 150 kilohertz of additional window exclusive on 75, 20, and 15 meters, and you'll gain valuable DX operating privileges for the extra class bands. And obviously, there is no longer a Morse code test required. Used to be, and that'll be in the history part of it a little bit. The extra class license also will allow you to become and serve as a volunteer examiner, part of the team that issues the exams. Once you get your extra class, you're able to actually serve as part of that 3-person accredited team to administer all levels of the test, including the amateur extra. If you're not an extra, there's restrictions on which tests you can actually volunteer to serve as part of that exam team for. Also, another part of the privilege of getting your extra class, you'll also be eligible now for that 2x1 short block call sign. So that way you can shorten your call sign if you want to change it to where you're no longer that the 6-digit call sign. This is the short calls are exclusively to the extra class operators, and you can also at that point put in for a vanity call sign for that program. I'm not, this is broke down pretty simple as far as your band plans. I do like the band plan that you can get on the ARRL website. Going into the Get Involved tab, there's a section there you can click on, and you can actually open up and print off your own amateur band plan, and I'll show you that real quick. Alright, this is the copy of the band chart from the ARRL, the color version. That shows you your bands and your frequency ranges with the color codeds over here. And I think this is much simpler to understand than what I saw in the book, and it allows a quicker reference here with when I got it posted up in front of me. So print one off, have one for yourself in front. It can help. So with that, let's get back to the questions. I just wanted to show the band chart that I'm using, because I think to me it's a little easier to understand, but it's because I'm used to looking at it too. But it just kind of breaks down your different colors, show you what portion of the band and the frequency range that you're allowed to use it, and each of the bands, and it kind of shows each band and gives you a little bit of a history on the portions. I don't want to get into as much on that because it's all pretty well outlined in all your different resources you can go to between your band plans and in doing that. So some more of your, obviously in 2006, the FCC issued rules that provide expanded voice privileges and removed the 200 watt power limitation on CW. So you've got an increased power out. There's no longer that limitation on that. A brief thing for the expansion stuff on 75 meters. Your advanced class license are able to operate voice from 3700 to 4000 kilohertz on a 75 kilohertz increase. You also gained 150 kilohertz of bandwidth for the voice operation from 3600 to 4000. 40 meters, you gained about 25 kilohertz to be able to go from 7125 to 7300. 15 meters, there's basically 25 kilohertz voice, from 21275 to 21450. As an extra, you can spend some time in the portion of 10 to encourage those new hams. The 10 meter portion. There's a portion on the 10 meter for voice for your technician that you can when you first get your license, there's a small portion of the 10 meter, which is 28,300 to 28,500. You could go in there and actually communicate with some of the new hams just into the hobby to give them some experience, encourage them along so they expand their hobby and open up more parts of the band to them. 60 meters, dial frequency 5366.5 was replaced with 5357, and an increase of power to 100 watts ERP and digital modes plus CW operation on all 5 channels of the 60 meter. Here's a little bit of info on becoming a volunteer examiner. Your extra class license gives you the opportunity to give back to the hobby, which I encourage. I'm probably going to be looking into becoming assist with the VE exams, especially at least for technician at this point. And when I can get my extra, I'll get more involved with that. You're as all of us should know, your exam team is at least 3 volunteer examiners that are accredited by the VEC. And if you want more information on that, you can go to the website here, the w5yi.org, and then go through the Become a VE link. They've got a whole program for that, and you can actually go in there and be part of their team, do instructor programs and teach lessons. If you want to get involved with that, you can go to the W5YI Ham Instructor Program. There's an 800 number here, as well as the website to go into if you're more interested in looking into that. So we can get into the history part of it. I find this very interesting. It's just learning more about the hobby, understanding what changes have taken place, and going from there. So, it's been 100 plus years, obviously, since the radio's inception. And there's been a lot of changes, especially in the last 25 years. I came into it after a lot of the changes where I really got involved here recent in the last couple of years. So I like to understand a little bit about where it came from and what I may or may not have to necessarily be concerned with as much anymore. But the FCC is obviously who governs us. The new rules came effective in April of 2000. There used to be 6 classes of a license prior to that. Now it's down to just the 3 that we all know, your technician, general, and amateur extra. What is the amateur service? Well, what are we all in this hobby? What is this hobby about? The amateur service qualified for persons of all ages who are interested in radio technique solely with a personal aim and without precautionary interest or pecuniary interest. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing, forgive me. A little backwoods at times. The word qualified, as far as the FCC is concerned, is by passing the exam, you prove that you're qualified to get on the air. That's what they're meaning by that. As far as the general part of this, the ham community knows no geographic, political, or social barrier. I think that's a key thing to keep in mind. I've yet to meet a ham that isn't friendly or willing to help somebody else out or get somebody into the hobby, give some guidance. I've had a lot of very neat and cool and just good situations and experiences with anything with ham radio so far. And I like to look at this with my channel that I'm trying to pay that forward. Trying to be, I always try to be friendly to any new hams, provide guidance if I'm asked something. Just in general, just paying it forward. I think that's what really makes this hobby outstanding, is how friendly everybody usually is and willing to help. The no geographic, political, social barriers. Basically, if you're interested and you want to get on the radio and talk to people, you can do so. And there's no limit to who you can talk to other than where your equipment will take you. Basically, radioactive 1912 is what kind of brought all this together with the licensing and everything else, because prior to that, there was no such thing. Any radio stations, if you set up your equipment, you could operate and go wherever you wanted, essentially. And as we all have learned in the past, the ITU, which is the International Telecommunications Union, is what kind of helps govern some of that. Um, as far as enforce radio laws within a framework of international agreements that are overseen by them. Um, your U.S. Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, is the government agency for the U.S. that actually regulates um, of our wire and radio communications. And they're actually who allocates what part of the bands and which bands were legally able to operate within. Little breakdown on your call signs. In 1927, that's where the alphabet was apportioned among various nations for your basic call sign use, and obviously your letters dictate kind of where you are in the world along with the zones you're in. The K, N, and W were solely United States. The letter A shared by United States and other countries. In the early years, obviously it shows here that letters A, B, and C were kind of how the classes of the licenses went. I don't know if we really need to get into a lot of this. I don't want to bore too much of everybody. Used to be in the previous, for your general license, you had to do 13 word per minute code speed, and the extra required 20 words per minute, and that was back way at the inception. In the 70s, the technician license became popular because of the number of repeater stations. All the use of the VHF, UHF repeaters is what really kind of got that popular and getting involved. In 79, they made changes to your Morse code proficiency. All countries were to waive mode code proficiency, exclusively for certain frequencies. Your technician no code license kind of came about in 1991 when the 5 word per minute Morse code requirement was eliminated for technician class. And as we all are aware, your technician class is a no code required 35 question test that you have to take and pass. Used to be with the novice, it was a 30 question test. And we're all called basically no code hams at this point, unless you learn it and using it, because there's no longer a required for Morse code, and that was kind of decided amongst the entire governing bodies of amateur radio. Another brief history. I'm just kind of skipping through some of this because I don't want to keep this too dry or skip through too much get too in depth with this. I just think it's good knowledge to have. Buy the book and read through it. You'll find it pretty interesting, I'm sure. 98, the FCC, again, working with the radio community to restructure all of our service. Basically looking to streamline the license process, eliminate unnecessary duplicated rules, and reduce the emphasis on the Morse code test. Results of this review came about in April 15 of 2000, which is where the restructuring included change in Morse code requirement for general and extra class to 5 words a minute, and the reduction from 6 to 3 amateur classes. Since 2000, there's only been 3 amateur radio classes, which are the 3 that we operate in the U.S. under today. Your technician, general, and extra. I'm not sure what other countries call them, but I believe they all probably have their own same 3 similar classes that open up certain parts of your bands accordingly. February 23, 2007 is when we completely eliminated Morse code for everybody. So I think that's a pretty important date. That in February of 2007 is when Morse code officially went completely removed from the license requirements. And there's obviously some grace period in there for people in the no-code technician class or the novice class to be able to be upgraded to that current class that affected by them. I'm not going to kind of get into that passage there. Basically in 86, the FCC's when they turned over responsibility for the maintaining of the exam question pools to the National Conference of Volunteer Exam Coordinators, the NCVEC. And they develop a question pool committee that go through and develop the question pools for all of our testing exams, in which they do so. They update the question pool basically every 4 years for each class. So that's kind of why you'll see your study guides and question pools and all that are only good to a certain date, which we've just kind of gone through now for the extra. So for the next 4 years, we're going to have this same 621 question pool to learn from. Basically, the FCC requires that at least 10 times as many questions in each pool are available to choose from based on the total number of questions in the test. So they need at least 10 times the number of questions that are on your exam in the question pool to be chosen from, which that's why we've got a 50 question test for the element 4 extra class. So, and the question pool is 621 questions right now. So, they're at least 10 times more. Let's see. Anybody is eligible to become a U.S. licensed amateur. You basically have to have the will to want to learn it, study for, prep, and take and pass the exam, and you can become a ham operator. There's no wait. Basically, once you get your license, there's no waiting time period or required period that you have to go before you can upgrade your license. You can take all 3 exams on the same day, and if you don't happen to pass an exam, there's no wait time or period to retake that exam. It's all based on when you feel you're prepared to take it. If you want to be a brave soul to take all 3 on the same test, have at it. Kudos to you if you succeed, because that's this last class is very challenging, I think, and I think I'm in for a long haul to get prepared. Let's see. I don't think we need to get into too much more of this to keep it too much more dry. It's just more information on how the setup of the classes and all of that. So this, I think, is going to be some good. As of 2015, the FCC will no longer issue you a paper license in the mail. You'll basically be given a link where you'll go log into your federal ULS, and you can print off a copy from there of your license. Everything is pretty much electronic unless you notify the FCC that you want a paper license, and then they'll send you one. All right, so getting ready for the exam. Obviously, I've already kind of mentioned there's 621 questions in this question pool for this element 4 for the extra class currently, and you're required a score of 74% or no more than 13 wrong answers to get a passing grade on the test. This question pool is going to be valid until June 30 of 2024. And basically, when you go to take the test, just a word of note, the volunteer examiners who make up the team that you're giving you the test are not permitted to reword the questions, nor are they permitted to change any of the answers. They can change the ABCD order of the answer choices. Every question in this book, letter for letter, word for word, number for number, and every right and wrong answer will be exactly as you see on your upcoming test when you take it. So the questions and answers and everything in here are exactly what you're going to see on your test. The only difference you may see is the order in which the answers are on the test. That's the only thing that somebody may change on you. Otherwise, what you see in this book is exactly what you're going to see for your 50 questions on the test. Anything in this book, as we're looking through it, that you see highlighted in blue, that's kind of like a keyword or important fact to remember, because it's going to help you pick out your correct answer. Just like any other test, they're going to have basically one correct answer, and then the rest of the answers are there to try to trick you into choosing one of them. Basically, this is a table showing the breakdown of the question pool, your supplement numbers, how you'll see them on the test, and in the book here. Say in the commission rules, there's 75 questions in the question pool of that 621. You're going to have 6 questions on your exam in this section. The operating procedures, there's 61 questions to choose from. You're going to see 5 of them on your test. It could be any 5 questions out of that 61, and so on. So as you can see, that's kind of how it works. So you've got 621 questions in the pool. Out of those 621, you're going to see 50 of those questions, and it can be broke down out of this here for what you're going to see. So hopefully that kind of give you a little bit breakdown. You know, your question coding, obviously, the E indicates that it's the extra class element 4. 5 would indicate your question taken from the, this is in the electrical principles section. It's E5. And then the 09 indicates the actual question number from the group. The D here would indicate your specific topic. So hopefully that kind of helps you understand how they do the breakdown of the test. It's very similar to what we've seen on both our technician and general class exams that you may or may not have already passed. Study hints, you really got to come down to what works best for you. I'm just trying to go through this one to force me to go through my book a little bit, and might as well share what I'm looking at and reading through as I'm going along. Maybe we can all study together by doing so. If this session doesn't necessarily work for you, let me know in the comments, some ideas or different ways that we might be able to do this. Here's some additional study materials. Obviously, there's some software study guides you can get on the computer, right from that W5YI group. There's another book here, Basic Electronics, Basic Communications Electronics, and Basic Dual Digital Electronics. There's some other materials that you might be able to utilize. So with that, let's start going through the first group of questions here. Kind of recenter this and maybe zoom in just a little bit more. And we'll just go through 10 to 15 questions and go from there. So, our first question. Which of the following carrier frequencies is illegal for lower sideband AFSK emissions on the 17-meter band RTTY and data segment of the 18.068 to the 18.110 megahertz? So it's asking us which one of these answers is illegal for us to operate on the lower sideband portion of that type of emission. So here's our answers. A, 18.068. B, 18.100. C, 18.107. Or D, 18.110. So what would make sense? I mean, we all know what lower sideband, upper sideband is and how that works on your frequencies, or should have a reasonable grasp on it. So if we're operating on lower sideband, you're potentially going to be that 0.3 kilohertz below where you're at on the dial. Just like with the upper sideband, it could be that 0.3 above. So for me, I would say we'd be right, if you go right to the bottom of the band of that RTTY data segment and you're operating on lower sideband, you could potentially operate outside the band. Where if you switch it to upper sideband, you can then go right to that bottom frequency. So I'm going to say, looking at my band chart, that it would be the 18.068 megahertz would be the correct answer for this question. So, and all of the radiated signals from amateur radio transmissions must fall within the allocated band edges. This means your carrier frequency must be far enough inside the band edge that all sidebands of the signal also are within the band. The 18.068 megahertz, which you can see that's in blue, is the very bottom edge of the 17 meter band. And if you're using the lower sideband mode of your transmitter, you will have sidebands extending well below your carrier frequency regardless of the actual mode. Thus, your transmission will be illegal. It is safest to place your carrier dial frequency at least 3 kilohertz away from the band edge so your sidebands are safely within the band as well. So here's kind of references for the index on this, and obviously your correct answer is A. So now that we've done that, I'm going to mark that one so I can go back through and keep studying. You know, a lot of us may almost, we kind of learn the material, but you're almost also at the same time doing a memorization too. So, next question. What is the maximum legal carrier frequency on the 20 meter band for transmitting upper sideband AFSK digital signals having a 1 kilohertz bandwidth? Is it A, 14.07, B, 14.1, C, 14.19, or D, 14.349 megahertz? Well, looking at the 20 meter band on our band chart, the upper portion of our data in RTTY is 14.150. So if we are operating on upper sideband on a 1 kilohertz bandwidth, I would say we would want to go 1 kilohertz below that upper sideband. So I would say it's probably the 14.149 megahertz. C. That's what I would guess. So the question is the mirror image of the first question, describes the same principles of all the sideband energy transmitted signal must fall within the band limits. The very upper edge of the 20 meter is exactly what I just said, the 1150. So when using an upper sideband transmitter, a 1 kilohertz ASK signal will generate an upper sideband of 1 kilohertz above the carrier. So the dial, and this is in blue, the dial frequency needs to be at least 1 kilohertz below the upper sideband, or 14.149 megahertz. So the correct answer is C. I will mark that one. I'm trying to actually, on this, I'm not just writing down the correct answers and trying to regurgitate it to you. I'm trying to put a little bit of thought in this, so I'm learning along with it. And if I say a wrong answer, it's going to be shown here on the video. I'm just trying to read along through. So stay, and this is also in blue, stay at least 1 kilohertz below the top edge of the digital sub-band edge. And that 1 kilohertz is coming from your signal, how you've got that signal set up. Generally lower sideband, upper sideband is based on that 3 kilohertz, and that's what we've all seen on previous exams. So it could very well change on that. Let me grab a little something here so I don't jump ahead on questions. Okay. Next page here. Our next question. When using a transceiver that displays the carrier frequency of phone signals, which is of the following displayed frequencies represents the lowest frequency at which properly adjusted lower sideband emissions will be totally within the band? Now, of course, this section, again, is rules and regs. So here's our answers. Sorry about that. So when using a transceiver that displays carrier frequency of your phone signals, which of the following displayed frequencies represents the lowest frequency at which properly adjusted LSB emissions will totally be within the band? So, A, the exact lower band edge. B, 300 kilohertz above the lower band edge. C, 1 kilohertz above the lower band edge, or D, 3 kilohertz above the lower band edge. I'm going to say, in the previous question, number 1, it was talking about the 3 kilohertz. And as we've all seen on previous exams, it's always in the kilohertz. So I'm going to say the correct answer would be D on this one. So this question has us on lower sideband again, maybe 40 meters, so we need to stay 3 kilohertz above the lower band edge to stay within the band. It would be considered poor operating practice to internationally hug a band edge and switch to the non-conforming sideband. I will highlight that one. And yes, I'm a lefty. So this is a little more difficult for me, kind of switching to operating hands. So our next question. With your transceiver displaying the carrier frequency of phone signals, you hear a DX station calling CQ on 3.601 megahertz lower sideband. Is it legal to return the call using lower sideband on the same frequency? So let me think about that. 3.601 megahertz lower sideband, which is our 80 meters. I'm going to say no, because 3.601 is only 1 kilohertz above the lower limit on phone. And thinking about the whole 3 kilohertz thing operating in lower sideband, I think that's going to put us outside the limit. So A, yes, because the DX station initiated the contact. B, yes, because the displayed frequency is within the 75 meter phone band segment. C, no, the sideband will extend beyond the edge of the phone band segment. Or D, no, U.S. stations are not permitted to use phone emissions below 3.610 megahertz. So I'm going to say the answer is C, based on just rationale that I kind of have already gone through. So lower sideband used on 75 meters, the lowest frequency near the voice band edge that would select as our digital carrier frequency is 3.603 megahertz. U.S. operators on 3.601 megahertz would have sideband emissions extending illegally below the band edge of the phone segment. Answer is C. So, stay 3 kilohertz above the lower voice limit on 75 meters. On my band chart, that shows it as 80 meters. So, that's why I said 80 meters. So, our next question. Give me one moment here. Resituate something. So, question number 5 that we'll go over today. At what level below a signal's mean power level is its bandwidth determined according to the FCC? At what level below is? Okay, let me just do that. Is it A, 3 dB, B, 6 dB, C, 23 dB, or D, 26 dB? Well, I am not sure on that. So let's see their reasoning. I am just not sure. I think it could be C, but I'm not positive. So, in a perfect world, a radio signal of some given bandwidth would have a 0 emissions outside the specified channel. With all the energy contained within this well-defined channel, but this isn't a perfect world, so bandwidth needs to be defined in terms of some achievable goals. A 26 dB bandwidth is one in which 99% of its energy is contained within the walls of the specified bandwidth. So I'm going to change my answer to D. I'm going to say that the answer would be D. Something not too difficult to achieve with practical transmission filters. Definition of the bandwidth does not depend on actual emission type, so it applies to AM, FM, CW, single sideband, or digital mode. Correct answer is D. Okay, question 6. What is the permitted mean power of any spurious emissions relative to the mean power of the fundamental emission from a station transmitter or external RF amplifier, installed after January 1, 2003 and transmitting on a frequency below 30 megahertz? So, is it A, at least 43 dB below, B, at least 53 dB below, C, at least 63 dB below, or D, at least 73 dB below? So looking at my band chart, 30 megahertz, with basically, anything below 30 megahertz, which is your top end of your, or just above the top end of your 10 meter band. So from 10 meters or less, all your HF bands. This one I'm not sure on. Sounds like I definitely need to get more so far I'm seeing I need to be a little more involved with some of your decibel stuff. I'm going to say 53 dB, B. Down on high frequency, basically below 30 megahertz, the FCC requires any spurious emissions to be at least 43 dB below the mean power output. So the correct answer is A. Amplifiers contain both harmonic and bandpass filters reduce spurious emissions down at least 43 dB. So we have a correct answer of A. Our next question. What is the maximum bandwidth for Datto emission on 60 meters? So we'll want to look at our band chart as well. This is all helpful, obviously, doing that. Is it A, 60 hertz, B, 170 hertz, C, 1.5 kilohertz, or D, 2.8 kilohertz? So looking at our band chart, the one channel actually shows 2.8 kilohertz. So I'm going to say D. Look at using my band chart that I have open on my screen. Use your resources. It'll help you remember. Channel 5332 on 60 meters, 5.3 megahertz. That channel 5332 shows 2.8 kilohertz. So I'm going to say it is going to be that, D. FCC Rule 97.303 states that amateur radio operators must ensure that emissions from their 60-meter station do not occupy more than 2.8 kilohertz bandwidth, centered on the channel frequency. So answer D. So I was correct. Using my band chart, I was able to choose the correct question. Question number 8 that we'll go over, and it kind of shows the band here, so you can kind of see. your different 100 watt ERP and your different channels, and then your for 60 meters voice sideband, USB, and the all right. So what is the maximum power output permitted on 60 meter band? Is it A, 50 watts PEP effective radiated power relative to isotropic radiator? 50 watts PEP effective radiated power relative to a dipole? 100 watts PEP effective radiated power, or radiated power relative to the gain of a half-wave dipole? Or is it D, 100 watts PEP effective radiated power relative to a isotropic radiator? Well, I remember seeing several of these questions on previous exams, and I know you're limited on HF to 100 watts PEP, so that narrows down to 2 of the answers. And a lot of the stuff always seems to be relative to the gain of a half-wave dipole, so I'm going to say answer C. FCC reason. So here's the reason for how to decipher the answer. The reason recently granted higher power output on 60 meter band, we can now transmit 100 watts effectively radiated power, ERP, relative to the gain of a half-wave dipole on that band. Since most HF rigs output just 100 watts, you are good to go with 60 meter dipole antenna. However, running an amplifier on 60 meters to exceed 100 watts output is not allowed. So answer is C. So that was the correct answer. And I'm marking this so I can go back through and study more on my own. I didn't really do much prep on these questions myself prior to, because I wanted to be this as real study session for myself as well as you guys watching. All right, next question. Where must the carrier frequency of CW signal be set to comply with FCC rules on 60 meter operation? Boy, they're doing a lot of 60 meter stuff, and I've never really operated on 60 meters. Where must the carrier frequency of CW comply with FCC rule operation? At the lowest frequency of the channel, at the center frequency of the channel, at the highest frequency of the channel, or on any frequency where the signal sidebands are within the channel. Generally, CW is always at the lower end of the RIDI or data for CW. It's always normally in a lower portion. I'm looking at the band chart. On some of them, it may be like on 60 meters, it doesn't really say. I'm going to say, looking at the 60 meter band chart, that it should be in the center of the channel. Looking at, from what I can see there, looking, how it's got CW and digital, all the channel and the markers are at the center of the channel. So that's what I'm going to say. The CW designator 150HA1A precludes tone modulated CW where different tones could help sort out different CW stations transmitting on the same channel. The new rules read, for CW emissions, and this is in blue again, same as anything that's in blue, make note of that. For CW emissions, the carrier frequency is set to the center frequency. I guessed right on that one using my resources. This means that all hams sending CW have zero error on the center channel display. All the CW signals will come out within the same exact tone. Band planning may help solve the problem of multiple CW signals sharing a specific channel sounding the same. So the answer is B, at the center of the frequency of the channel. Okay, give me 1 second here. Get that covered up so we're not skipping ahead. This is just more stuff on 60 meters. cover, 3 simple rules to remember: phone operation, sound card digital mode, and CW operation. Phone operation: set your transmitter to the upper sideband and your VFO to display the frequency of the chosen channel from the table. Be sure your transmitter is set to limit the bandwidth to 2.8 kilohertz. So for phone operation, set your bandwidth to 2.8 kilohertz and use your band chart going to that specific channel. And here's your 5 channels for 60 meters. For sound card digital mode, you want to set your transmitter to upper sideband, select the channel frequency on your VFO, and click on 1.5 kilohertz on your waterfall or spectrum display. For CW, go to the center of the channel, 1.5 kilohertz above the assigned carrier frequency. And depending on your particular transceiver, this may or may not correspond to your VFO. So you want to make sure with your radio's operator manual. So that's that one. And from there, let's go on to the next question. Okay. What notifications must be given before transmitting on the 630 meter or 2200 meter bands? So what do you have to do before you transmit on 630 meter or the 2200 meter band? Okay. Something I didn't know before, but reading my band chart tells you the answer here. So let's move on to the answers. Let's see, scroll down. So, is it A, a special endorsement must be requested from the FCC? B, an environmental impact statement must be filed with the Department of the Interior? C, operators must inform the Utilities Technology Council, UTC, of their call sign and coordinates of their station? Or is it D, operators must inform the FAA of their intent to operate, giving up their call sign and distance to the nearest runway? So looking at the band chart right above your 630 and 2200 meters, there's a little disclaimer right there. So reading that, excuse me, the answer is C. Operators must inform the Utilities Technology Council, UTC, with your call sign and coordinate of your station. So let's get into the descriptor of it. Some utilities, such as those employing power line monitoring, use frequencies near our 2 nearest amateur bands on 630 and 2200 meters. While the potential for interference is minimal, if you anticipate operating on these bands, you need to inform the local Utilities Technology Council of your call sign and coordinates. Unless there is some issue, you will not receive any response from the UTC and are free to operate after a wait of 30 days. So you want to, if you think you're going to get into those bands and tool around and try to make contacts, file it with your local Utilities Technology Council. 30 days after you file it, you're good to operate on the band. So the correct answer for that is C. Okay. Do a couple more questions. We'll finish out this page, and then we'll end this portion of the study session. So, our next question. How long must an operator wait after filing a notification with the Utilities Technology Council before operating on the 2200 and 630 meter band? Well, we just said that by reading it on the band chart, but for due diligence, we'll expose their answers and process elimination. Operators must not operate until approval is received. Operators may not operate after 30 days, providing they have not been told their station is within 1 kilometer of a PLC systems using those frequencies. Operators may not operate until a test signal has been transmitted in coordination with the local power company. Or D, operators may commence immediately and may continue unless interference is reported. Well, we already said that. So it's going to be, the correct answer here is B. Operators may operate after 30 days, providing they have not been told their station is within 1 kilometer of a PLC system using those frequencies. The reasoning behind this: when informing your local utilities technology council of your intention of operating on 630 or 2200 meters, you must wait 30 days, and that's in blue, so that's obviously a key, to give the UTC time to respond. If you are within 1 kilometer of the utility using those frequencies, you'll be notified of this fact, but it does not necessarily mean you are prohibited from operating, but specific restrictions in your particular area may apply. So the correct answer is B. And those of you that watched some of my previous videos know I kind of showed my ham shack. And you can see I've got the band chart posted right above my computer station and that, where I'm usually playing around on FT8 digital or on the phone. So I've always got a band chart in front of me. All right, so next question. On what portion of the 630 meter band are phone emissions permitted? Well, there again, I'm going to use my resources. Your phone appears, according to the band chart, is the entire band, 472 kilohertz to 479 kilohertz. So, is it A, none? B, only the top 3 kilohertz? C, only the bottom 3 kilohertz? Or D, the entire band? So I'm going to say D, the entire band, based on the band chart in front of me. Now, I don't think it's cheating unless I put a band chart in front of me during the exam, which I don't think is allowed. So, although most activity on our 2 lowest frequency amateur bands is either slow speed CW or narrowband digital modes, there is nothing legally to prevent the use of phone modes like AM or single sideband phone modes on 630 meters, and to a lesser degree on 2200 meters. There are no FCC mandated subbands on 630 or 2200, but gentlemen's agreements may be eventually adopted and should be allowed, or should be followed. So the correct answer is D, the entire band. And let's get last question for the day. Except in some parts of Alaska, what is the maximum power permitted on the 630 meter band? I'm going to say we are QRP on 630. Looking at my band chart, 5 watts EIRP maximum, except in Alaska within 496 miles of Russia, where the power limit is 1 watt. So I'm going to say 5 watts unless you're within the 496 miles of Russia, then you've got to operate on 1 watt. So is it 50 watts PEP, 100 watts PEP, 1 watt EIRP, or 5 watts EIRP? Well, we know both C and D are correct. And the way this reads in some parts of Alaska, so reading into that, I'm going to say the correct answer is C, 1 watt EIRP, because in some portion of Alaska, that's where it's limited. So operating on 630 meters is similar to operation on 2200 meters, and that maximum EIRP is specified. However, on 630 meters, the EIRP limit is 5 watts, and there is a limit of 500 watts transmitter output power. There is an additionally EIRP power restriction to 1 watt if you're within 800 kilometers of Russia, of the Russian Federation, which includes some parts of western Alaska. So, they're saying answer is D. So they're tricking us. I was saying because of some portions we'd be limited to that, but they're saying the correct answer is D. So I got that one wrong because I thought into it too much, thinking 1 watt because we're within Russia. But they're just saying go with 5 watts of EIRP and you'll figure it out from there, I guess. So that is all the questions and portions of this study guide I wanted to go through today. I hope you found this helpful and fairly easy to follow along with. And I hope you choose to join me later on to continue with through more of the questions. So please, hit subscribe if you want to follow along and learn more with me. Like the video so we can get the algorithm boosted to get it out to more people. And perhaps if we get enough people looking to join and interested, maybe I can transition into doing this live, and have a live following and do it real time with feedback and interaction. So I appreciate you watching, and we'll transition out. Okay, well, I appreciate everybody watching today. I enjoyed going through this, and I think I learned a little bit. Hopefully you did too. Please remember, hit subscribe on that red button. Hit the like button. It helps get the videos out there. Leave me a comment below if any ideas or feedback or something different you'd like to see. Or if you'd like to participate and help me out, especially some of you fellow YouTubers, please join in. Let's make this big. Maybe we all can upgrade if we need to. I appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Hey, get on the air. 7-3 Doll.